Hello, welcome back. Anyway, the I literally have no idea what to talk about right now, but it's just a general thought. Part of me feels like okay, you need to start, you need to do something. There's a pressure for me to actually do something because again, I haven't officially posted something for a very very long time. Although I've made some videos which I'm always contemplating, okay, are this good enough? Should I actually post this and everything like this? And I didn't do the thumbnail, which the thumbnail would actually be quite fast, so I have no excuse of not doing that. But in any case, I've been procrastinating the entire day. And well, I just decided, you know what? I'm just gonna do it right now, cause otherwise I'm not gonna do it. So I thought a lot of what I should share. Well, the entire day, contemplating, right? But these are more towards ideas that I want to achieve in a longer term, right? These are not probably not going to be the topic that I'm going to be sharing in this video. There is definitely the topic of I do think that at some point, as detrimental as that discussion would be, but the whole discussion of gender wars, right? Like why is it that it seems like, girls and guys, at least in this modern time, fail to get along, right? There's views of some extreme ends of, like, the guy's perspective, and then the extreme ends of like female perspective, and how it's screwing everybody over, right? Of course, that's something that I want to address. Not right now. That video is gonna be a freaking nightmare for me to make. But I think at least how I initially wanted to structure all this content creation is that I'm gonna be doing videos throughout the weekdays, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, on topics that is psychological in nature. And I want to actually keep a day like Sunday to talk about things that is more towards, well, philosophy, maybe like things that I think about, things that I worry about, or maybe it's just something, sharing something about myself, my personal life, my worries, or etc. Right? So this is, again, the first thing that I'm always the first if I'm not wrong, the first video that I actually did on this type of topic is on the whole idea of the deciding on what you want, right? And I think I shared a little bit on the viewpoints of why I decided that I want to create content, because a part of me just tells me that okay, this is really something that you have to do, and it's getting to the point that, like, well, I can't really ignore it, right? As good as whatever the content, how it actually helps people, it, of course, ideally, the reason why I want to do it, because I feel like there's a need, right? There is a obligation for me to actually share what I know or what I think that can potentially help other people. But it's more towards the reason why I do it is not so much that I can feel a sense of achievement or a sense of joy and meaning in life, of helping people in general. I think it's just selfishness, right? To get rid of this particular feeling that maybe to a certain extent is kind of close towards guilt, right? Well, you have to do something, you have to pay back. What do I have to pay back? I have no idea. But in any case, there is the thing that I think that potentially I can talk about is the whole idea of perception. Perception in our daily life, in our modern life, and, well, part of it can be attributed to accepting the suck, right? So what does it mean to accept the suck? For me, I think, or rather, I think feel is the correct word, that in our day and age, a lot of emphasis input in terms of perception, right? And maybe it's not something that's related to our day and age. Maybe it's just something that have all the while been the case, but it's more or less this idea of the ideal life. And the ideal life, if I can put words into it, I would think that it's something along the line of you you go to school, you get good grades, and because of your good grades, you're gonna land a good job. And with your good job, you get your promotion, you get, well, rich in that sense, and you retire comfortably. So that generally is the ideal path, right? So I didn't really expect to be able to bring out pain here, but this maybe we can just think of it this way, right? So this is when you're born, 0, and then like your schooling years. So if this is your lifespan, right, this is like 80 years old. So all the while when you're schooling up till 18, I think different countries have different schooling age, maybe like 20, right? I think 20 is a fair number. So let's say 20, within this period, ideally what you should be doing is that you should be grinding your studies so that you get good grades. Be it you come from impoverished background, or even if you come from like a rich background, I think there is this emphasis of getting a good degree. And good degree, in some sense, you can say that, well, the university matters. And in order to get into this good university, you need to show that you are able to study and you're able to achieve the grades. Because I think the Ivy League universities, or whichever popular or perceived as good universities, or good is not even a good enough word to describe it. Like maybe the perception of the best university in your particular country or region or the world, generally it's kind of a chicken or the egg kind of situation. Is it that they are able to groom really intelligent people, or is it that they just accept intelligent people? So of course this goes into the idea of reputation, right? And the reason why they don't really want to bring in people or take in people of lower grades, less competitive. Well, competitiveness is one aspect of it, right? Because if everybody wants to apply for your university because of the reputation, then ideally you need to kind of sieve them out. And to be fair, what is most fair is probably grades at that point. So I can't really fault them for only wanting people for high grades. And maybe it's not the case of they only want people of high grades, but it's just that there's so many application and whatever remains. But it's the whole idea of you get a good grade by the time you're 20, and at 20 years old you get yourself a stable job, right? Stable, reputable job. So people tend not to think in terms of like jobs such as a garbage cleaner or a sweeper or a toilet cleaner or anything like that, right? Even to a certain extent, when at 20 years old, when people think in terms of like the ideal life, they don't really see roles such as like a waiter, waitress, or any of this. What is the best term for me to describe this? A career that is not high income earning, or maybe there is no high income potential. So one aspect is income, but another aspect of it is also reputation. So which is why for people in general, society as a whole, they'll look at certain jobs such as like a sex workers being undesirable. Although arguably you can say that some of those people actually earn a lot of money. So it's not just purely based on income, but it's a combination of income plus reputation. So which is why like roles such as investment banking fits this criteria of being high income and also high in reputation, that people think that wow is ideally the goal, right? So think in terms of this way, you have a very good degree from a very good university, and you graduated with good grades, with high honors, and you apply for a role in a consulting firm or maybe an investment banking, right? And you manage to get in because of, well, be it you've been networking, so you also have to work, in this case not just your grades, but you manage to get into the firm and you work until you are, I don't know, maybe 50 years old. Although nowadays they are pushing retirement age further and further, potentially even 60 years old. And from there, hopefully you have enough money to actually retire, right? So this period you are earning money, and then this period is kind of like you are spending the money that you accumulated so that you can retire comfortably. And hopefully over here lies our hopes and dreams, which is like your vacation and everything like this. And in between this period, I think there's a whole idea of like, well, you also have to think in terms of a family as well, right? You need to get married, be it you're a girl, you're a guy, right? Get yourself a nice partner, marry, give birth, have children, maybe like 2 to 3 children, and set yourself up a nice family house, and then a good car, vacation every now and then. And I think this is what, at least from a very young age, this is what imprinted onto us as the ideal life, right? You are supposed to do all these things. And it really gets me thinking because, well, naturally, we all know that this is not the only path in life. Because if we were to think in terms of other acceptable paths, is that there's also that type of path of like, okay, well, I am not going to study, right? I'm going to drop out of university at maybe 18 years old, and I'm going to run my own business. And then I become very wealthy from it. And maybe from the examples that we know, so if we take an example of like Facebook, for example, right, Mark Zuckerberg, well, he's not really to the point of like 60, 70 years old, so we don't really know where that life will go. But ideally, even if we were to extrapolate, what we infer is that, well, you're gonna run the company, or basically you have wealth coming in, right? Because if you don't have the stability of this part, then ideally you have wealth from this part, overwhelming wealth that you are able to accumulate, what somebody is able to earn throughout their entire life, but you're able to accumulate the same amount of money in, let's say, 5 years. And because of that, you are able to maybe even retire early. I think people tends to want to think in terms of like, well, I want to retire early, because frankly, I don't think people in general don't really like to work. I think there's a subset of people within the population that truly enjoys working and truly enjoys going out there and achieving things. But I do think that they are a subset of the population. They are not everybody, right? As much as we like to attribute this to the what we should strive to become, right? Maybe parents would want to imprint on their children that this is what I wish that you are, because again, there is also this aspect of, if I'm unable to achieve it, but I'm related to someone who is able to achieve it, then to a certain extent, that person's achievement is also attributed to me partially, which to me I think is completely insane, right? It's the whole idea of, okay, let's say hypothetically I am related to somebody who is hyper famous. Let's take even the most ridiculous example, like if I'm related to, let's say, somebody like Elon Musk, right? Hyper intelligent, rich, and then I would think in terms of like, I have a certain amount of success by attribution of that. So if I were to go out and I talk to people, then I'll bring out that, like, hey, I'm related to Elon Musk. And the thing is, people will give me they will have a certain perception of me purely because of that. But I don't think that should be the case, right? Because that is the same pressure that we have, and the same pressure that parents put on their children to work hard, so that they can actually compare them with other children. Like, my child is this, is that. Maybe like when you're younger, it's like, my child, is this position in the school and is hyper intelligent and score this in like the national exam. And when it's older, then it's like, well, my child is in this occupation and my child is in this occupation, and etc, etc. Which I always think that I understand from a human perspective that is normal, and at least from this particular age, or maybe it's just human behavior in general, right? I haven't really figured out whether or not it's really imprinted in the human animal in general, or is it just something that as society develops, then it becomes the case, right? So basically what I'm trying to figure out is that, well, hypothetically, if animals can talk, would they have all these things, right? But to me, I always think that this type of thinking don't really make sense, because I do believe that everybody should ideally live their own life and get their own achievement, and have those achievements be attributed to themselves. So it kind of it shuts down the argument of, well, I'm sacrificing my life, so that I'm sacrificing my dreams so that I can like have you. So I think that there's some parents there's some parents in hindsight, they will think in terms of like, well, I didn't really get to achieve the things that I want, because at the point of when I'm like maybe I am at this point of 20 years old, I decided that, well, I'm going to have a kid and I have to give up my dreams, right? So this is a tangent. Maybe for guys, I think the example is like, well, I used to be a bodybuilder, so but because the pressure of being a young father, then I need to stop all these things, and I have to take care of you, then I can't become a bodybuilder. And then maybe like the equivalent of female, if they are really attractive, then it will be like, well, I didn't really pursue the path of being a model because I want to be a mother. And because of all these things, then you kind of put the pressure on the child to achieve the things that you weren't able to achieve in your life. Which I think that type of thinking, to me, it doesn't gel with my own personal life philosophy, I would say, in this case, because again, what I think is that we should achieve our own achievements and have those achievements be attributed to ourselves. So if, let's say, even if I'm related to Elon Musk, I think that in that situation, I have no rights to actually use, by proxy of relation, get certain amount of credit to somebody else's work. I think it's completely insane. But then, of course, in order for that to happen, then I would say that we have to devalue the whole principle of family, right? Because I think some people achieve achievements so that they basically bring up the family name, so to speak. So I think that this is quite complicated, right? But anyway, going back to the whole idea of this alternative path, so I can finish up this thought, is that the alternative path is that of being an entrepreneur. So you start your own business, maybe you sell the business at some point, you pocket maybe around like 3 to 4 million, and hopefully with good financial planning, you're able to make the 3 to 4 million last for the rest of your life. So to me, at least, it seems like there's this two accepted path in life, and not as much as possible, from what I observe at the very least, is that people in general would judge each other based on how we fit into the ideal life. And I think part of the ideal life is also the idea of, well, what do you have to achieve by a certain point in time. So if, let's say, if you're 25 years old, what income should you ideally have? What stage of the career should you be? What stage of having a family, a relationship should you be? And etc., right? So it's kind of like, well, do you have an income? Do you have like a good job in terms of reputation, right? And good job in terms of your income? Or do you have a relationship? Do you have a girlfriend, right? Are you getting married soon? If you're married, when are you guys gonna have kids? And it's always this issue of comparing ourselves to the ideal that I believe creates a lot of stress in people. And maybe now, although I'm not thinking about it initially, just pondering about these thoughts at this current moment actually makes me question, does this relate to depression to a certain extent? So maybe because all these criteria are easier to achieve many years ago in different generations. So if we are in let's say we go into 1990s, for example, right? So we don't want to go too far into the history, right? We just go 1990. In terms of 1990s, the income that somebody is able to earn just based on their first job is able to purchase a lot of different assets compared to current income, right? The purchasing power is different, and maybe because how much you can actually purchase in terms of assets is larger, so maybe reputation don't really matter that much, or maybe there is certain priorities of, so long as you're working in a factory, then you should be more or less okay, right? Well, that's what the school system is actually developed, is for people to actually work in a stable job. And in terms of relationship, there is less, but I'm pretty sure there's going to be a lot of issues there, right? Whether or not things really are as good back then, I think that there are pros and cons of back then, so it's really difficult for me to actually say whether or not relationships are better. But I do think that people in general tends to be less selfish, both male and female. So maybe because of that, there is less of this like gender conflict, right? Which is like, well, girls sucks because of this, or like guys sucks because of this, and because there's less of this like, well, screw you, screw your gender, and like, well, no, you screw your gender, then maybe relationships in general are better in like the 1990s. But the whole idea is that the maybe because things are more achievable back then, maybe because things are harder to achieve today, there's a rise in depression. Could be, might be, I don't know. I need more time to actually think about it. It's just a glancing thought, right? But to me, it's the whole idea of fitting into a particular ideal. And it really got me thinking a lot because of how different times are, right? Just like the example that I gave, if we are talking in terms of 1990s versus the 2024 at this point in time, well, first of all, there's actually quite a large amount of time in between. Like, holy crap, it's like 34 years. That is approximately a third of a century. It really gives context of like how old some of us actually are, sadly. But just beyond that, it really got me thinking that how times are different, right? Maybe back then, and I always think in terms of tradition. For me, I'm not somebody who have too much faith in tradition, because I always think that traditions are set up, it's a form of system that was created, that was perfect, is the perfect solution for that particular time period or situation. But if you were to take a tradition and you extrapolate out into all situations, then there are things probably would break down here and there, because the factors are not the same. Just like if you were to remove a jigsaw puzzle, just because a jigsaw puzzle fit a particular place, if you were to take it out and then you try to fit it to other places, it will not fit, right? Maybe it might fit one or two places out of coincidentalness or etc. But generally, I do believe that tradition works on the idea of it's the best solution created by the best minds, which is why people put emphasis on it, right? The wise elder created this tradition, but this is only for that particular point period, right? And people use tradition as a form of to shortcut their thinking, so to speak. But it's because of tradition itself, then we tend to compare ourselves with a matrix that was created long ago. So the whole idea of like 1990s, right, whereas you're supposed to get married by a certain point, you are supposed to get a career of a certain type, of a certain reputation, of a certain income by a certain period of time. It got me thinking, is this thought process, first of all, is it logical at all, right? Even taken into the context, even arguing for the fact that as much benefit of this thought brings to the time period of 1990s, is it even logical at that point of time that we should compare ourselves to a certain expectation? Again, there's pros and cons, right? If let's say your life is just derailed to no end, then, well, the ideal helps. But again, in 2024, where times are so different, we have new technologies, and supply and demand and what people actually spend money on is also different, which creates different emerging markets. Would a different path be better? Walking a different path, generally, I would say that definitely feels wrong. But perhaps the question that I'm trying to answer and the question I'm trying to ponder in this aspect of the expectation is, should it feel wrong, right? So it's like should. So what do I mean? What do I mean by should it feel wrong? If I take the example of like right now, where I am, as a person, I would say that I'm closing into like another crossroad in life, right? Where I'm somebody who entered the workforce. I didn't complete my degree, but I entered the workforce. I went back to study so that I can complete my degree, but now I'm at the point of like, okay, you are 1 year away from graduation. So if I were to get any sort of job right now, I'm always going to be measured based on my highest qualification, which is going to be significantly lower in terms of the type of job that I can qualify for. Although you can say that 1 year away from graduation, I have a good amount of knowledge in the field that I'm studying in, which is finance, and by nature of my job history as a financial advisor, that I should be able to qualify for all these things. But I 100% agree that a company shouldn't just take my word for it, because what if I'm lying, right? So obviously they will want to have a certificate, which is a degree, which is not a promissory note that this person is intelligent, but more of a promissory note that this person is not dumb, right? Because to me, that's what school qualifications are. Your degree is not a measure of how smart you are. I believe a degree is basically a guaranteed stamp from your university that says that as dumb as this person could potentially be, we at least promise that he is not this level of dumb, that he's able to complete a degree. And I'll even extend this up to masters and PhD, right? It's basically institution's promissory note that you are not dumb, or at least you are not super dumb, right? Could you have a PhD and still be stupid? Yes, right? There's example of that on the internet. No, but I don't really want to cite any sources because, well, it could be mean. It could come back to me, right? I wouldn't even know if I would be legally liable, for defamation if I were to do something like that. But the whole idea of like, okay, well, we fully understand that. Then what about the alternative path, right? Because again, I said that I'm at a crossroad, because I do feel like, to a certain extent, part of what my calling in the world is to share about psychology. Is to learn about psychology, because I learn psychology. I think that, okay, maybe I just detour from this thought itself first, but I do believe that everybody in this world are created for a particular purpose. And this is attributed to our talent. But also partially, I also understand that, well, your talent may be just what was available to you at a young age, right? If somebody is too poor to ever afford a violin, but their talent was violin and music, they might never fulfill their talent. And I think that for whoever who haven't found their calling in life, or they haven't have a speculative calling in life. So an example for me is psychology, right? I believe that it's my calling in life, but I cannot prove that it's my calling in life. So you can say that psychology is a speculative calling in life. And the only way that you can measure calling in life is through success or through history. So if we were to look at people like Beethoven, we can say that, well, his calling in life is music. But when he's still alive, you wouldn't know that hypothetically he could suddenly decide, you know what, I want to be a scientist. And then he made certain scientific discovery and changed the world. Like maybe he wrote E equal MC squared instead of Albert Einstein. Then maybe historically people will attribute him and his calling to be scientific in nature. So, right, while you're still alive, I believe your calling is speculative. So for whoever who haven't found their speculative calling in life or talent, then I believe that gives people a lot of worry, and, well, they're always trying to question what's their meaning in life, right? But for people like me who have a speculative thought of what their calling is, then I would think that on top of being able to discover your calling in life, so that's number one, right? You have to have a particular life that accumulates towards you finding out your talent. So at least from what I see, for historical psychologists or maybe philosophers, they tend to have to be pretty well off at some point, comfortable enough, right? Not filthy rich, because I believe that if you're filthy rich, then maybe your life will path a different trajectory and you'll focus on different things. But then it has to hit a point where, like, your life circumstances change, your family circumstances change, and then, like, maybe this up down is the whole idea of you have to see the highs and the low in order for you to actually be able to observe human nature. So I think the situation must fit your talent in order for you to actually find your particular talent. Whether or not it's the situation that forms your talent, or is it the situation that nurtures a talent that is already there, speculative and debatable. But there has to be this aspect of, you have a particular purpose, but once you realize that, okay, you have a particular purpose, then it's kind of first of all, you'll realize that things are easier for you. So just like, I'm pretty sure music is easy for Beethoven. I don't know. I never asked him, right? I don't know him personally. But I'm pretty sure that people who are musically inclined, for example, if let's say they have perfect pitch, they are able to understand music the level that somebody who has no knowledge in music, or somebody who has to learn music through a structure that is developed, instead of a structure that is instinctual. So I do believe that people like Mozart or Beethoven or any other good musicians, you don't have to teach them too much about music theory, but because they feel music in a sense. But for anybody who wants to learn about music, then somebody like them who understands and feel music would have to also have the capability to put them into a structure that is easy enough to teach people in general. So they have to kind of explain what music theory is, so to speak, right? Somebody have to come up with the theory of music, the music theory, in order for people who are not musically inclined to learn how to play music, how to create music, etc. So this is the whole idea of, I think that's what clues people into their talent, right? Do you actually feel a certain subject, or do you have to go through a certain structure in order for you to learn a subject? On top, like, even if we were to discount the whole idea of delusion versus actual understanding. So I can be delusional about a certain subject and not understand the subject itself, or I can really have this intuitive understanding of the subject that only people who are gifted in this subject are able to see, right? It almost becomes like a certain type of vision. And again, going back to the music understanding, like, using the music example, because I truly do believe that based on whatever you learn, if what you learn is design, you're going to be able to look at a logo and see things that people who are not educated in design are not able to see. Just like anything, right? You're an architect, you're going to look at buildings the different way from what the layman is able to see, right? If you're educated in finance, you look at a financial statement, they give you all the numbers, you are able to make inference from those based on not your intelligence, but based on your understanding, right? So it's a whole different kind of vision where we extrapolate that type of vision where it's a learned skill to something that is innate in nature. So I think that, like, I deviated from this for a very, very long time, but the whole idea is just that for me, I do truly feel like, because of the gift that I was given, right, I'm able to see psychology, or at least I believe that I'm able to see psychology in a way that was easier than lay people. Again, I can't compare the ease of understanding psychology, right? But because of what I feel like was granted to me, I feel a certain amount of obligation to actually give and educate people in general, because that's how I benefit psychology, because I believe that you can benefit a certain subject based on your talent in a certain way. So Mozart, for example, can create really good music and be famous, and his contribution to the music world is through his works. Just like in psychology, there are people whose contribution is to advance theories. So like, these are people like your Sigmund Freud, or people like the Carl Rogers or Piaget. But these are great psychologists that come up with theories that have revolutionized. I'm pretty sure I'm butchering that word, right? I can't think and speak and record at the same time for some reason, right? But the whole idea is that they change the world of psychology. But even if you're unable to do that, then the least that I can do is to try to use other aspects of my personality, which is being analytical, pondering things in general, to hopefully help people understand things that might be difficult to understand. Of course, clearly the degree of how easy I am or how easy I'm making this topic sounds is questionable because the way that I think is complex, but not complex in a good way, not complex that like, hey, complex in a better way, but complex in a very unorganized and confusing way, right? Which is something that I want to be able to be better to actually help people understand psychology, because again, I can see how psychology have helped me in my personal life, right? How I'm able to actually interact with people, being naturally awkward but still being able to be perceived as normal enough, and even the whole idea of human influence, right? How to get people to change their view about me, so to speak, right? So that things get easier for me, and I really do hope that I can help people in this aspect. But just to like close off the point, because again, this still goes back to the whole idea of like, should it feel wrong, right? If I'm walking a path where I decided that, okay, you know what, after I get my degree, I'm not going to go into finance. And again, I took a finance degree instead of a psych degree because frankly, there's nothing less useless than a psych degree if you're not going for masters. And again, I know that it's going to be very difficult for somebody to not have a psych degree and apply for a psych masters, comparing to somebody who already have a psych degree is going up to a psych masters, right? But because it is not impossible, you can say that the path that I took is in due consideration of what is the most stable backup plan, safety net, right? Because otherwise then I have to all in masters, and I feel like at the point where I took up a degree, which is 27 years old, it's a little bit too late for me to all in, right? Without considering other considerations. So because of that, I decided what I'm going to do. But the whole idea is that if I decided not to go into a path or go into finance in general, and I decided to go into the path of, well, I just want to share my knowledge of psychology and I want to create the videos on psychology, part of me feels that that path is wrong because it doesn't fit into society ideal, right? It's the whole idea of like, well, this path seems stupid, this path makes me feel like shit, this path makes me feel like a loser, because it doesn't compare up to what I should be doing at this point of time. When people would look at people at similar age as me, they're gonna be like, hey, you should be this, you should be this, you should be this. And I'm pretty sure that this problem is, and this consideration is not solely bad by me, right? I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people in society who also, because of comparing up to society ideals, feel like they do not measure up. And as a matter of fact, not a matter of fact, but a matter of opinion, I do think that it seems as if that this is quite a widespread problem, because you can have a certain measure. So for example, you can have the ideal relationship, but then you realize that your career is not measuring up. Then you feel like crap because you are not a perfect representation of the ideals, and you can have a very good career but you don't have a significant other. Then you also feel like you fall short. So, well, maybe this is felt by everybody in this day and age, right? Again, because of the rising standards that we need to be measured up against. So it's always this question of going back to my personal life, which is like, is this path wrong? So even if I were to think in terms of like, okay, let's say, what if you want to go to streaming? Because I think for a period when I was younger, like maybe a few years back, I did a little bit of game streamings, because that's also something that I kind of enjoy, right? Playing video games, although I'm not playing video games as much as I used to, but it's an aspect that I kind of enjoy. And I think that just like I'm able to break down psychology and then like what is this, what is that, and take all these different type of analytical considerations, video games are enjoyable to me because I'm able to do exactly the same thing. Especially if it's the game that requires thinking. For example, right, you consider all factors, and would people enjoy something like that? Maybe they would, right? Maybe they would. Maybe I'm able to gather a audience from that, but that's not that much of the consideration. Is that, well, I would still feel like, because I'm not fitting into the ideal job, right? You know, like if let's say people to ask, well, what's your job? Well, I'm a streamer. Then you'll feel like complete crap, right? The only exception to that is after you reach a certain level of like popularity, right? So if you're reaching a certain level of popularity and you have fame, you have fans, right? Because with fans, it comes with reputation. Then naturally, it also comes with income, right? If you're that popular, then maybe because of that, then people will start to be able to see that, like, you know, wow, this person seems like, you know, is have a good life because they are a successful streamer. But if you are in the mass minority, or not mass minority, if you're in the mass majority, which is like, you know, you're not here, you're not there, or you're just starting out and the factor is time, then of course you feel like complete shit, right? The only exception of the rule is that if you are in a period of time, or you're in a period of your life where it's expected for you to not have your life figured out. So I would say that if let's say you are sub 20, you are before you are 20 years old, then potentially because you're still schooling, right, then people will see it as like, no, well, it's perfectly fine for you to do this at the side because your main role is to function in a school setting. But again, when you're going to like adult and you're trying to do like a career switch, then I think that it seems wrong. It seems wrong, but whenever I think in terms of like the logic behind this and whether or not this is a viable path, I think that there is arguments that you can argue that this is a viable path, in the sense of there are incentive structures in place. There are platforms like Twitch and YouTube that are able to generate income based on creating content. Of course, you have to achieve a certain level of minimum success to even be able to get a dime out of it, right? But even in the case, what I'm trying to get at is that there are structures in place. So it's difficult for you to get there, but it is possible. But the whole idea is that before you even get there, or even if you get the minimum, so you manage to get a partnership with Twitch or YouTube, if you don't have a certain level of success after that, then it's of course the whole idea of you ask yourself, or people will actually ask you then, like, you know, why are you not doing anything else that is easier? Then maybe at the end of the day, the question becomes, go back to the whole point of what do you actually want to do with your life, right? And what is your calling in life? Which again, to me, it's this ongoing loop, which, well, I believe my calling is that I want to share how I understand the world of psychology. And if hypothetically, by some freaking miracle, that there are within me is some answer to certain aspect of psychology, and I'm able to contribute to psychology with that in mind, more so for the subject of psychology, not so much of for my own personal fame or recognition, but solely just to further the subject of psychology as a whole, then I feel like that would have given me meaning. But in order for me to walk that path, I have to walk the path where, of course, I'm thinking about psychology 24/7, which is the path that potentially would be creating videos and maybe even streaming, right? You know, so that I can kind of live my life in a way that is relaxing enough for me to actually think about all these things, because I do believe that at least for my best thoughts tends to come from a point of relaxation, not a point of pressure. maybe even subjectively you can think in terms of this video in itself. If you even think that whatever I share in this video is not 100% bullshit, it comes from just a singular thought of like, well, maybe I should share about this, and then I just expand on this for like 40 minutes. But in any case, I know that this is all over the place, right? But again, all my videos are all over the place to a point that I feel like it's kind of a moot point to actually bring up that, like, hey, I'm so sorry that this is all over the place. But in any case, today's video, again, is not so much of sharing in terms of a psychological concept, although by accident I did share about some psychological concepts here and there, but they are not intended. It's just more towards sharing my point of view, maybe my philosophy, but it's more towards the things that is constantly on my mind, right? Which is, am I measuring up to the world, right? The expectation of the world, or am I measuring up to myself? Because I do believe that if you were to live your life from a very self perspective, that means just focusing on like what you want, creates a lot of problem. Just like how I think that the issue of a relationship is that a relationship should be a case of you thinking and always acting in the best interest of your significant other. Because ideally, both of you should be considered a individual organism. So it's like doing good things for you should feel the same way for me. And whether or not it truly feels the same way, it might not, because of personality difference, right? If you're utilizing introverted feeling, then you are much less likely to be able to feel that way. But at the very least, it should be thinking about the best interest of the other person, right? And I do think that relationship fails when one person's personal interest overrides the interest of the significant other. So the interaction kind of feels like a zero-sum game, right? Like, I know that we are in a relationship, but you should look out for your own interest, and I'm going to look out for my own interest. Then to me, that is where a relationship ends. And how it extrapolates into the point here is that I know that if I were to live my life, and a lot of problems in life is attributed to this idea of my own personal experience and my own personal feelings triumphs everything else externally, right? I believe that once you are able to separate your own personal needs from the external world, you're able to let go of your personal desires, then in some sense you can say that it helps you become a better person. Be it you want to argue it from a perspective of a Buddhist concept of enlightenment, right? Which I'm not Buddhist, right? But of course I see wisdom in everywhere that wisdom can be found. Arguable whether or not that's wisdom, right? And again, arguable that there is not wisdom. But again, it's the whole idea of, I do believe that we should of course think more for other people in general. So it always comes back to, what should I do? Should I actually follow what I feel like I personally want, or should I follow in accordance to what is expected of me? So again, this is kind of like, it goes into a whole different topic again, right? Whether or not, based on what I shared on my own views, is considered selfish, or can it be considered selfless? Not that I think that, like, what I'm doing is selfless by nature. I'm not that delusional. I do think that a lot of things that I want in life, even going through the path of sharing about psychology in general, is from a perspective of selfishness. But in any case, I can't drown on this over and over again, right? If you really did watch this from the start to the end, and you are able to learn something from it, great, right? If my views resonated with you to a certain extent, and I've helped you, or not helped you, but I made you feel like, hey, at least somebody out there have kind of a comparable view with me, and I brought you a certain amount of comfort, then, well, I'm happy about that. If you want to let me know your own experience, then feel free to let me know. But in any case, I'm gonna end off the video right here. I know I didn't really talk too much about, like, my plans of like future videos, but I'm probably going to do more videos on MBTI, because I do think that or at least release the videos that I have already created for the functions, because I have to get I have to get on with that, right? And again, I do want to eventually share about something called the capybara effect, which to me is a concept that can help people in generally in their interactions. So it can potentially help you with girls, right? Because the whole idea of interaction relationship in general, not just about girls dealing with guys but also guys dealing with girls, works on the principle of making the other person feel safe enough. It's something related to the previous video that I did on creepiness. But in any case, I'm not gonna draw on this much longer, right? So hope you enjoy this. Have a good day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.